From one of Australia's former leading homicide detectives, this is I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin.
Liz Hayes, welcome back to part 2 of I Catch Killers.
Nice to still be here.
haven't kicked you out yet, or you haven't stormed out yet. Can I ask you a favour? Could you just say, I am Liz Hayes?
Well, you don't say I am Liz Hayes. You say I'm Liz Hayes.
Oh, okay. So,
You take
see,
the
you've
am.
corrected me.
I'm
Okay.
Liz Hayes.
I'm Gary Jubelin, and this is I Catch Killers. How was that?
Excellent.
Thank you.
Maybe it's there is an intonation that you have to get right.
Okay, get it just
But,
just right.
Maybe in front of the mirror or something.
Okay, I'm not with practice. This could be hello. Okay. Now, in regards to interviews, when you're interviewing people, I've seen your interview technique. You like to get people relaxed, and then you hit them with the hard questions.
Well, a little. No. Look. I think everybody is at their best when they don't feel, threatened, or if they feel relaxed, as comfortable as they can. I think that's a given. I think all people will respond, no matter who they are, actually, when they feel, they're feeling reasonable about themselves, or if this is, it's really hard to say to people just relax when you've got about 4 cameras around them and it's just you and whoever, and it's quite dark everywhere else. But ultimately I just try to engage them at a level where they feel it's okay. And I say, look, this is all up to you. You know the answers. I don't. I'm asking the questions.
And people they're very aware if you're talking to them, and if you're trying to nail them, or you're revealing a little bit about yourself, making them feel relaxed, and then
I always look, if it's a bad guy, as you would say, I don't give them anything.
Yeah.
No, I have they know.
Yeah.
They know why they're there. And that's part of the interviewing technique, is to know why you're there, what you're aiming to achieve, what you're hoping to get, what's this story about. So you pretty much know what you are achieving or would like to achieve. Your research has probably told you what the answers are.
Yeah.
But sometimes something totally different pops up, and you obviously deal with that. But I quite like people feeling like this is a moment for them, if that's what the story's about. I don't have any qualms in bowling up the appropriately difficult question.
Yeah.
I don't like. I'm not a natural combative person.
Yeah.
But I don't have problems doing it if that's what's required.
That's interesting you say that. I found that I'd come out of interviews where I've had to go hard, and I'd be drained because it takes that emotional energy, but you don't feel good about yourself either.
It's not. We don't live our lives every time we go to the supermarket.
Yeah.
Nailing that poor girl about is that price right? No, it's not how we live our lives normally. But when we're having to deal and reveal things and call people to account, then you have to. There's no way around that. I never. Yes, it's not my natural habitat to go, great, today I'm going to nail Gary Jubelin to the wall.
But you do. I see it in some journalists, and there's almost a smugness when they've nailed a person. I don't think that's the right way to go.
No, and I think when it comes to television, at least, I think the viewers can see, and they will make a decision also about you and the questions you ask and how you ask them. And if you're not careful, they will have turned on you and somehow or other like the baddie. It's weird, but it happens. So you have to have a fair-minded approach to those things. But if somebody's just out and out lying, you have very little choice but to say.
And go back and present the facts and call them into account. Okay, are you relaxed?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
It's all good.
All right, well, now I'm going to ask you a question. And this is in my detailed research about Liz Hayes, reading the book, your book.
what I wrote.
It's come to my attention that you cohabitated with well-known TV presenter Richard Wilkins.
Yes, but in the...
Do you care to explain yourself?
Yeah,
Liz?
in the platonic sense, I want to make... And that's one of the things I've had to say over and over. Guess what? I did not go out with Richard. We shared an apartment together. But yes, oh my gosh. Actually, we had a ball.
Yeah.
We had a great time. He was just doing MTV. That was, and he'd come out of a marriage, and we were in the back of a limo going to a charity event.
Yeah.
And he told me that, his world had fallen over and he didn't have anywhere to live. Do you think he meant that? Was I set up and I didn't even know?
You're
anyway,
so naive, Liz. Naive.
I can be, by the way. Anyway, I said, look, I've got a spare bedroom and a spare bathroom, actually. So if you get stuck, and he arrived the next day. He was stuck. Anyway, but it turned out to be a fabulous friendship. We had a great time.
Yeah.
And look, he's popular.
Oh,
He was a very popular man, I
he's
have to say.
popular. Yeah.
He had a lot of girlfriends, I have to say.
I would have never picked it.
But I know. And look, to be fair to him, because if he hears this and thinks it's one-sided, he'll say he endured a few interesting characters on my behalf as well. So,
Okay, well, secrets should stay secrets. And we talked in part one about the people's right for privacy.
We did.
And so I respect your right for privacy.
Thank
Liz.
you.
We'll move on. Okay, well, this is I Catch Killers. We jump from one thing to another, but a crime that had an impact on the nation, and I was actually involved in it too, as doing the crime scene, was the Lindt Cafe siege. And you had an opportunity, or you did interview the survivors or the hostages of that as a collective group of people.
Yeah.
I know that had an impact on you. It took something out of you, or you felt emotion from what's there. I've spoken to Louisa Hope, and an amazing woman, and what she endured. I know when I was in the crime scene, it had some. We went in straight after the incident had been resolved, and there was just an eeriness about the place, and you could almost feel the fear in the room. What was it like sitting down with the hostages and speaking to them after they survived what they did?
Oh, awful. It was pretty raw. It was 8 of them that I spoke to, and all of them are individuals, different. How they reacted to this incredible scenario where they've been held hostage in a cafe in the CBD, and they've gone in there for their morning coffee, and it doesn't end for another 16 hours or something late that night, and it doesn't end well. No, it doesn't. Let's face it.
No.
Ultimately, it didn't. So, they allowed me in. They let me come into that room, that cafe with them, which I thought was incredibly generous of them. They gave me permission to understand what it was like for them, and I think there were times when I could see inside that cafe when they were talking to me, and I did feel, oh God, what would I do? I don't know what I would do. And I felt terrible for those who ran and felt guilt. I felt terrible for those who were left behind and couldn't run. I felt, it was an incredible moment in time where this story allowed me to understand what it must be like to, as best I could, to what that situation must be like. To be held against your will, and basically they were of the opinion this guy had a bomb.
Yeah.
They were told that basically, and to know that he's not there to look after them. All their lives are on the line, and I was totally moved by them. Totally. Those who were thinking about what to do, those who were just trying to stay calm, those who were, Louisa Hope's got a mum. Louisa's not able to run that easily. And in the end, mum couldn't run, so she had to decide not to run either. That's the first time in that kind of scenario I've been able to sit and listen to what that was like, and it it really took me into a moment in time which it stopped me, and I thought, I actually don't know what I would have done.
Yeah.
I really don't know what I would have done.
Terrifying, isn't it? What they
I did feel their terror.
Yeah.
And I felt their anguish. I felt it all, actually. I felt really moved by it.
And you've got an understanding too that people that ran, how they felt when someone died, others that didn't run. So many decisions to make, and who knows how you would react in that situation.
Do you know how you would react? Because you have some training and
Yeah.
you have some know-how.
Yeah.
I come from a place of, I've had some hostile environment training, but not,
Yeah.
there's no way in the world I would have been sure of any decision I was going to make.
No, there's things that I think in my mind until you've actually confronted with them on what could be done or couldn't be done. But I understood people like that with no training, just as you said, for a morning coffee. And I think that's what rocked everyone too. It could have been any one of us, and it literally was just you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you're caught up in that. You also spoke to the sniper, the police sniper, didn't you?
I did.
Mark Davidson.
Yes,
Yeah.
and he was terribly affected. And I think one of the things that affected him, from what I could gather, is a terribly nice guy, by the way, is he's watching it as a sniper.
Yeah.
And communications were difficult, is how I would say it. But he felt, and he saw Tory executed. Tory Johnson, the cafe manager, was executed. And he saw that, and he felt as though he'd let him down. And I think that's the core of what gives him that terrible PTSD that they have, including the man who went in, the head sniper. Oh, he wasn't a sniper. He was
tactical team, the entry team.
All of that plays out in your head, and I guess, but I could see also from his perspective, and I heard all the other arguments of whether he could have really taken the shot or whether it would have been accurate, or he shouldn't have been allowed his mind to be worried about that. He did the best he could, all that. But as a human being, he's there. He's in a position where he felt in his heart he could do this, and then he sees this terrible moment. I can understand. And yet he was highly trained.
Yeah, I know, but he would have known with his training, and I can see the sense of responsibility he would have felt and different things. But yeah, the entry team that went in too, like those guys, they believed he had a bomb too, but they still went in, and it was an awakening for the city in the regards, I think, because it was so public. It was just everything about it that just sort of, okay, this is the world's come to us now with that type of situation.
It was a moment where I think Australia literally changed.
Yeah,
It was like that kind of terrorism can happen here.
Yeah.
And that was what I view it as terrorism.
Yeah, I think we've got to call it for what it is, and I think there was lessons learnt from the police response and all that, which is if anything comes of it, you'd hope there's some lessons learnt from it.
Yes, and that's hard for everybody.
Yeah,
it's really hard. I don't profess to have a high moral ground or view on any of that because I don't know, except for what we're all told. But and even then, I still can't be sure. Other than to say what I am sure is that, yes, everybody is better in terms of knowing what should be done better.
Yeah. Well, and it was a contained situation too, and you could imagine if it was a mobile situation, how difficult that would be. But, okay, where are we at now? Ku Klux Klan.
Oh, come on.
I've never got to speak to someone that's in the Ku Klux Klan, but I'm getting to speak to someone that's spoken to someone that's in the Ku Klux Klan.
That was a very weird business, I have to say. We were going to speak to the Ku Klux Klan, which is even hard to say, because the Klan was of the opinion that Donald Trump was giving them a wink and a nod that what they believed was what he might have believed, because he wouldn't come out and, and say that they were a racist, irresponsible group of haters. But they were of the opinion that he was on their side. So off we went, and we went to this particular place, which was Klan country. And the Klan family, they had this massive property where they had, a conference centre and a bit of schooling and a
all set up for the Klan.
Yes, and where you can come and learn a whole lot more. They had a souvenir shop.
I'd have to visit there. Yeah.
I didn't see any pillowcases or anything like that, but they had anyway. They had a television studio, and they broadcast twice a day, and so they had big billboards on the side of the road, and look, what can I say? It's not my world by a long shot, and trying to get into
I'm glad you clarified that.
But trying to get into their heads about why you feel this.
Yeah.
Why are you so threatened by people who aren't white?
Yeah.
What is the problem here? What's going on?
Yeah.
And there's no good answer to that.
Did you get a sense of who they were, like where it's coming from?
They were a generation of people. Okay. They come from usually a long line of, clans.
My granddad.
No, true. But it was you can't. It's like, it's a circular conversation. You just will never nail them.
Yeah.
Ever nail them down.
There was they would justify their position, or think they could in their minds they were justifying their position.
Like a lot of cults and
Yeah.
people in these kind of groups are quite seasoned at not answering questions.
Yeah, okay.
They're slippery, They don't. They want you to believe that they're not haters at all. They just feel like the white person is now getting a bad deal and all that sort of stuff. Their history tells a whole other thing. But yes, but I think what are you getting to the muffins?
Let's do the muffins.
Well, Ben, who happens to be now my partner, he was the sound man. I don't know whether sound recordist is probably what I should say. He's raised with, we can't go into people's homes without having something. You must always bring something, like a plate. You must bring a cake.
This is your country upbringing.
It is. And we all were like, okay, so we pulled over. We're like, we're going to spend the whole day with them.
Yeah.
And in some respects, we have to be respectful. Yeah. So we will do that. And wow, we turned up with a dozen muffins and on the way out, because it all ended badly, because it was always going to end badly.
You couldn't find that common ground.
They just when you just can't say that anything they're saying is truthful.
Yeah.
They do want you to go. But there they were, the muffins to be eaten. And I did say that even they, whilst they had a mouthful of muffins, couldn't tell us to bugger off, because really we'd brought the muffins.
Good tactic. Well done, Ben.
I think if anything, if we won anything, it was like in the manners department.
Okay.
But yes, no, it is the most peculiar business.
Yeah. Well, I'm fascinated that you get to speak to these people. Like, we see them, we hear about them, but there's people out there like that.
But you've spoken to cult leaders.
Oh, yeah. Well, any cult. If you have people that are vulnerable, because I think a lot of people that go into cults are looking for something in life, and then it's easy to manipulate. It's psychology 101 to, you're part, we'll look after you. And yeah, I think that's part of what goes in. It's a safe place
for them. Mind you, the Klan is long established. So, they've been around forever, and you know what you're getting into, I think.
Well, look, we talk about your values that you grew up with because of your family and your parents. Imagine if you've grown up and, say, everyone in town, you don't trust them, and that type of stuff. So,
yes, I think it's really hard for people to step outside their families.
Yeah.
And defy their families. I think that's a really hard thing to do. And if you're in the Klan, I would have thought it'd be particularly hard, because their finances and everything are locked in.
Yeah.
So I think, I think it.
Oh, well, I think it's important to at least go in there and put a spotlight, so we get a sense of what it's about.
I was fascinated to meet Klansmen. I was fascinated to kind of get a bead on them a bit. and the respectable face that they tried to put forward, and it was a business as well. Yeah.
You also hung out with some gangsters in Chicago.
Oh.
Well,
Oh my
what's
God!
your mate's name? Side CTC Dupop or whatever?
Duop, yeah, yeah. So the Chicago gang story is a serious story. I mean, at the South Side, they were particular. I mean, so many young black youths were dying, and innocent people, like people. Mothers and their children were dying in their houses because the bullets were coming in and they were sleeping and shot in their bed basically because of this unruly gang shooting. Yeah. Hey, we're seeing a bit of it ourselves, but this, innocent people getting caught in.
It's on steroids over there.
Yeah. And so we went over there and our connection was Duop. But he came from Chicago, and he actually now lived in California, so we had to wait for him to fly in. He was running late because he had to pick up a gun.
As you do.
And I was like, oh my God, all right. And we were going out with him to meet some of the gangs, and no, it was palpable. Yeah. Oh, you got a very clear sense that it was a fairly dangerous thing just to drive in the streets.
Yeah.
And it was an education. We spoke to the funeral director there.
Right.
Now, who was an extraordinary man, but he said that young people were coming in to decide which casket they were going to get at the age of like 13.
Sad.
Because he said they were of the opinion they weren't going to make 35. And he said quite often they didn't. But his point was, and a lot of people's argument was, that if these were white people, kids killing white kids, maybe something might have been done about this.
Yeah.
But because, in other words, racism might have been playing a role in why that wasn't being sorted. But I got to say that as a white woman, on the street, chatting up a couple of gang bloody members, I did think, okay, well, this is my job. But it was bizarre.
Yeah.
And it was dangerous. It just felt dangerous. You just knew it was.
You got a sense of it.
Yeah,
well, I think like the figures that every 3 hours someone was shot and every 14 hours someone was murdered in that part of town.
They were the statistics. And even the police were getting out.
Yeah.
They believed it was too dangerous.
Too dangerous. Yeah.
It was it's out of control.
Problematic that can just the country, and it's not resolved. We'll bring it back to our country, and I get your take on speaking to serial killer Bill McDonald and Leonard Lawson, who is a murderer and rapist. So
these guys were serial killers.
Yeah.
I didn't know much about them, to be honest.
We haven't heard a lot about them because their crimes were from, when was it?
50s.
In the 60s.
Yeah.
McDonald became known as a mutilator, stabbing 5 male victims to death and removing their genitals, terrorising Sydney in the early 60s.
Yeah.
And then you've got Lawson, who raped 3 women in the 50s, and 7 years later, after being released from prison, murdered a young girl and took a hall full of Sydney students hostage before shooting a 15-year-old pupil.
I bet a lot of people don't even know about that. I didn't.
Yeah. I've heard them only because of the work I've done. But these people are out there. Tell us what your sit down with them was like.
Well, Lawson was in Grafton jail, and McDonald was in Long Bay, I think.
Yeah.
And so they both agreed for us to come and chat to them. And I guess it was because they were nearing the end of their life. I thought it would be fascinating to understand what makes a serial killer tick. But, of course, the serial killer's not going to say, look, Liz.
Yeah.
Although...
Explain it all to you.
Although I have to say McDonald did say he was a monster.
Yeah.
McDonald didn't hesitate in saying he couldn't stop himself. He just, his backstory might have given you a hint of problems. He couldn't keep a job. He didn't know where his next meal was coming from. He'd sometimes be quite homeless.
Yeah.
But I guess you might be able to argue he had a mental illness.
Yeah, yeah.
And the style of crime was,
The
removing
mutilation.
male genitals
Yeah.
is pretty out there.
Yeah.
And I guess if you got him to really talk, maybe you'll find a reason for that.
What the history of it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
He just looked like a bloke who was ready to just die in jail, and he was quite happy about that. He didn't mind being in jail.
Yeah.
I felt he felt comfortable in jail because A, he was being fed,
Yeah.
and B, he knew that he would just probably kill some more.
Well, they're the type of people that society needs to be protected from.
Yeah, totally.
And did you find, and I've found this when seeing opposite notorious killers, sometimes their, what's the word I'm looking for, normalness. Like it's...
Oh, they could have been
it's
anybody,
not,
yeah.
Not stamped with I am a serial killer, and that's a chilling part about it. Like people want to see the monster, and sometimes they're not the monster.
Yeah, I remember when I was at Grafton. No, was it Kempsey or Grafton? Grafton. And Leonard Lawson was brought in, and I'd already been told, not to sit too close to him and all that sort of stuff. So I'm like sitting back emotionally.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, I was not at risk at all.
Yeah.
This was a bloke who... his personality was one that wanted me to believe he was, incredibly sorry for what he'd done, and he wanted to be forgiven.
Yeah.
And he'd been married with 3 kids, and just couldn't understand what had happened, that he'd done this, but he kept doing it.
Yeah.
And and he's the one who had a key to his own cell.
Because he didn't trust people.
Because a lot of thieves in here, Liz.
Oh.
And he was an artist, and
Yeah.
he was so he took me into his cell to show me, his paintings and stuff like that. What am I doing in here?
Yeah.
But look, in terms of being seemingly an ordinary bloke, yes,
Yeah.
there we are. This old fellow, and he said if it helps. I spent 20 odd years and I never saw the sun, the moon, I never had grass under my feet, all that sort of stuff. So, I want you to know I have felt punished. But it's all small potatoes for
Yeah.
victims and their families, So, but I did find it fascinating, I must say, to just look at these people and figure out, okay, you're one of those people that I could never be sure about in the street.
Yeah, yeah.
You're, and I wouldn't have picked you.
I think that's the thing that I get from them. Quite often you can't pick it. But I also, I'm not sure how long you spent with them, but if you spend enough time, I walk out of those type of situations and feel dirty. Like you just go, oh, yuck. It's just, you want to just sort of wash yourself away from it.
I didn't necessarily feel that, but I did feel as though, McDonald didn't try and change my views or anything like that, but just being in his presence, it does strangely make you feel like this has not been a great part of society I've been mixing with. And Lawson, of course, I just thought he was a con man. He was just trying his hardest to put on a good face now.
Speaking of bad people, Dolly Dunn, the pedophile.
Yes.
Now, this is one that you should be very proud of, playing a part and finding him. Do you want to tell us the story about that? Because he was the Australia's most wanted pedophile.
He was at the time, and he had fled the country with the full knowledge that he was wanted. And we got a tip-off that he was in Honduras and that his passport was up for renewal. So therefore, we knew he wasn't going to go to the Australian Embassy to get it renewed, we didn't think. So we're of the opinion he's probably not going to go anywhere. He'll probably stay there. Now, you might find this slightly hysterical, but the police apparently didn't have the resources to go and
Liz, I will not have you criticise police on I Catch Killers.
and that's,
really?
No, because I get it, but 60 Minutes had the resources, and we put a woman on the ground, a producer, and she could speak Spanish and or Portuguese, whatever the language is, but she got on the ground and just went village by village, bus by bus, and tracked him down, and then we had to get her to film him. So she had to have someone help her lure him into a meeting where she could film him without him knowing. Then we had to send that film back to the police here to say, that's
This is where
him.
he is.
This is him, no doubt. And it was like, yes, that's him. Okay, well, we'll go and get him. Who wants to come? But the AFP, I think New South Wales Police, but the DEA, the Department of the Drug Enforcement Agency from America, had to come because to get him out of Honduras into America, where he could be extradited, was their role. So we get over there, and of course we've got all these people waiting for us to bring him in, which we did. So we brought him, we lured him in via someone who was offering him a business opportunity to a hotel. And it was so funny because we all gathered, the cops and us all gathered in a room beforehand and discussed how we're going to do this and what we wanted to achieve, and an agreement with them that, you know, we could, given we found the bloke, can we film him?
Yeah, I think that's
Is that all right?
Yeah,
and
that's a reasonable trade.
But we had to be cognizant of the law, and they have a job, and the whole point is to get him. So we can't let this bloke obviously slip through our fingers and they miss him. That would be a travesty. So we did all that. We had the conversation, and then the agreed line from me, because everybody had earpieces in, how long are you going to keep running for, Mr. Dunn?
Right.
Which meant he's about to go and put his hand on the doorknob and leave the room, the hotel room. Which I did.
That was the case. That's it. That's exciting. Yeah.
And so, but I was saying how bizarre. Dolly Dunn's been lured up to this hotel room, and the person he's with gets a call. We organise a call for him to say, get out. And he goes, I've just got to pop down to the lobby quickly. He leaves the room, and Dolly goes, okay. And Dolly's got a scotch, and he's on the lounge, and he's got a cigarette. And he goes, okay, yeah. And he's looking around because we've got cameras in the room. We can watch him. And then we've got a connecting room. So we come through the connecting room door, and I can't imagine what Dolly Dunn must have thought. But he was pretty on it.
Yeah.
You know, I could see I was more nervous than him.
Yeah.
You know, and you could see he was
just switching on.
He was like trying to work out, okay, how am I going to get out of here? And so he was trying to head for the door, and I can't stop him, of course. Yeah. But it was a bizarre scenario.
But for him and the crime, he was a teacher at Marist Brothers.
He
wasn't
was,
he?
yes, and yes,
schoolboys.
He was filming young men, young boys, and all that sort of stuff. But the evidence was all there. But it was. Well, I just guess it was a strange business going out and getting this guy, this big.
Well, because he was
criminal,
he was on the run. I think it all blew up in the Police Royal Commission where it came out, and but that was a good get. So I like that. I like those stories, Liz. That's where the
are you
media,
pleased about that?
Yeah. That's where the media are doing well.
Well, it is where media can do well, and it doesn't happen like that very often. But it was a great cooperation as well. We weren't blocked. I think it was accepted that might as well use 60 Minutes resources if that's the way it's going to be.
I've always, and I do understand you got to protect the integrity of investigations and all that, but there's so many opportunities where the media can help, and I think the police are slowly coming round to the fact that, like with podcast, Teacher's Pet, that type of thing, they've got to open the doors up that, if we're trying to solve something, we've got to, rely on the community, and the community might be, in your case, it was the media.
Yeah, and I think, look, we all have to be cognizant of the law, and we do, if we're really about getting, the bad guy or woman out, then we do have to let the police, take control. But in this scenario, I guess it's because we invested heavily. We put someone on the ground for a month. We tracked them down. We did the whole thing, and then we said to the police, we're on our way. And they were very understanding there.
Yeah, no, that worked out well. You also went into Camp X-Ray, where David Hicks is held.
Yes, Guantanamo Bay. This is this little slice of paradise in Cuba, which the Americans run, and you land there and it's totally controlled by the American authorities, but you go into town and it's like a little America, you know. It's you can get your hamburgers and your pizzas and your beers and everything like that, but then you just up the road is this horrific place.
Just describe it.
Well, the first incarnation of Camp X was we drove around and they had a lot of, because it came out of really 9/11 happening, and they were bringing what they perceived as terrorists from all over the world, really.
Yeah, and dropping them in there.
Yeah, and David Hicks got caught up. He was in Afghanistan, and he's an Australian who, I think he said he was, a troubled, or he was trying to find himself, I think, really, to be fair to him, and found himself in this situation. But he, when I went there, it just looked like it was all barbed wired and netted off, but you could look in, and just lots of orange jumpsuits, goggles, quite often, in chains and whatever. Out in the open, really, a bit of a tin shed occasionally for some shelter. It was pretty confronting. It was a pretty rough place. There was not going to be, as they said to me, there are no medium security terrorists. So there'll be no medium security here. And I think America in particular was angry, and they were not in the mood to be.
No half measures. It was
people would argue not even in the mood to be humane. So it was pretty out there. So the next time I went to Guantanamo next time. They'd improved facilities because the world was starting to come down on them.
Yeah.
And because not everybody was guilty, it turns out.
And it blew up. There was stuff that was uncovered, the way the guards were treating some of the prisoners.
But you can be held, and it still can, be held there without charge forever.
Yeah. That's not good, is it?
Well, that's the argument for the rest of the world. And we get that, you don't much like these people, but you have to have evidence to hold people. And anyway, as we know, David Hicks came home. But this was a place where there was no forgiveness. There'll be no forgiveness in this joint. This was tough. This was hard. This was to show the world, no, we don't put up with any of that.
This is how we're going to react. Did you report on 9/11 or in any capacity?
I wasn't. I didn't get across there. I came over later.
Yeah.
Because some Australians were caught in the Twin Towers.
Yeah.
And interviewed some of the people, or a particular person who had to run for their lives down that, I'm not sure which tower, but it's, that was something, wasn't it?
Oh,
I actually was in a hotel in my bed in Melbourne and had the news on, and I thought, what's that? But when I saw the second jet go into the second tower, without doubt.
Well, it changed the world, didn't it?
Yeah, that was.
That
I think we all felt unsettled by that.
Yeah.
It was suddenly like, if that could happen in America.
Yeah. And
of course, we did see some, ripple effects of that.
What about you spent time in Afghanistan?
Yes.
What's it like? And for you going into like a war zone? And,
well, the first time was the Taliban was. Fighting the Northern Alliance, as it was called. So we'd gone in there to see. It's a bizarre business because Afghanistan's very beautiful.
Yeah.
The Hindu Kush, the mountains, everything is quite wonderful, and yet it always felt like it was could erupt at any time. And they didn't much like women, but they hate them a whole lot more now. But, they tolerated me. We were constantly trying to find the front line, which was, well, where is this war? And we'd hooked up with this warlord who'd been well educated in America and the UK, and, his father had handed down, the warlord title. He'd built this big pink eagle up on a mountain, which you could crawl up into and sit on his rugs and drink, I'm not sure if it was tea. It's a very, there's a lot of hypocrisy, I think.
How did you find yourself, like, from a personal point of view, being in those environments? Were you worried all the time, or did you?
I was the first time around. I was particularly naive.
Yeah.
So we're walking to we were walking to what we were told would be. We finally found the front line, but we're walking to a place down towards this bridge, and we were told, okay, this is where we might be able to get some shots. So walking with some soldiers down there, and then suddenly there's this gunfire going off, and everybody hits the deck, except I go, "What was that?"
Boy, that's.
Which was appalling in glorious hindsight. And Ben, who is now my partner, he was, this hand pulled me into the ditch and said, "Get down, like, you dummy." And then, of course, suddenly I became very aware. Oh God, this
is a war zone.
Yeah, suddenly I became very aware they're shooting at us. Because we were told that the tripod we had looked a bit like a rocket-propelled grenade, So it was like, oh.
Did you give the tripod to Ben to carry? Or?
Yeah, here. Oh, well, there I was trying to do a piece of camera, and I noticed all our soldiers, and including Ben, others all running and hiding behind this wall that I was not behind. So I learnt pretty quickly.
Sometimes ignorance can work.
Oh,
in
it saved me.
Yeah.
It saved me totally, because I'm not even sure I would have gotten out of the car.
Yeah. But just so many experiences, and on an aircraft carrier, the US aircraft carrier, 5,500 people on the ship. What was that like?
Oh, quite something. We're just getting on is quite the trick. So you get on this C2 or whatever. It's an aircraft that lands on the deck that brings you in.
Yeah.
But they tell you, and you've got to be aware of it, that it's kind of like a crash landing. So you come in, but we rev up as we come down, because if we miss the tow rope that's supposed to collect us, we've got to be able to take off and go over the edge and get airborne. So we can't afford to pull the engines down. We're actually going to be going harder, faster as we're coming in. And that to me was like, you are kidding me. And you know how you're ready for that crash? Yeah. Oh, anyway, I did that twice. I did it on a couple of aircraft carriers, and it to me was like, what am I doing? But anyway, yes, a floating city. That is exactly what they are.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And all those fighter jets, as they're all being sent off, that is a battle zone right there in the sea.
It's just a floating war machine,
It
isn't
is.
it?
It is. It's very testosterone. It's a very, I figure I'm very much a woman, because I'm like, Actually, that's not fair to the women of the world, because that's just talking about me. I'm like, oh God, what was that?
That's a noisy plane. It'll wake you up in the morning.
You never slept. Let me put it that way, because they're also landing on your head underneath at great force, and they have to land the same way I did.
Yeah,
coming in hot.
What's the I haven't even covered the celebrity, so that's because you said you don't like gossips at the start. Give us a celebrity story. What was your? We'll simplify it. What was the celebrity you enjoyed most talking to? And
okay. Look, there were a couple, and everybody will go, of course. George Clooney always was professional. He'd turn up and he'd be very professional. But Dustin Hoffman was a whole new ballgame. He wouldn't go.
Just like the chat.
He was just having a fabulous time. And when his publicist said, look, we probably should leave, he went, you go. I'm fine. And then at the end, he asked for the whole interview to be sent to him. He enjoyed it so much. So he was old school. Yeah. You know, they turn up and they know why they're there, and they just, if they're in the mood, admittedly, but he was great. And probably, she's coming to town, so it's a terrible story to tell, but Mariah Carey. Yeah. Honest to God. She kept us waiting like 8 hours.
That's rude.
The question is, why did we wait?
Yeah.
Well, because we were constantly being told she's just in the next room and she's just, she'll be in a minute.
So it just strung you along.
In a minute. And it went on. I think I left my hotel room at like 5 in the afternoon, and when I walked in, it was like 4 in the morning. Yeah. And I was setting up, getting ready for breakfast, and I thought, I just don't even know Why? You know how the life goes out of you?
Yeah.
She's arrived and it's like, oh.
How'd that interview go? Did it even get aired?
It's not one of my finest. Not one of my finest.
Hi. Just snarl at each
She
other.
looked $1 million and she tried really hard, but I just
We
felt
could all look $1 million
flamed
if we
out, you know.
took 8 hours to get ready.
Well, she was doing other things, but I just truly,
Yeah.
yeah.
You've said you don't enjoy
No, I don't.
celebrities.
No,
It's.
Oh, well,
what-
I think it's because of the machinery around it.
Okay.
It's just not
It's not the celebrity, it's all the people around them.
It's the whole, toing and froing and
Yeah.
agreement and, everybody's watching and making sure. It's just, I think I call it palaver. And that's exactly what it is. There's so much palaver. And in the end, you just really want to sit down. We all know why we're here.
Yeah.
You're going to flog a film or something. And
Yeah.
I'm going to be grateful that you want to talk to me. And we'll discuss a whole lot of things that you might be okay with. I'm not going to embarrass you. I'm here to make a great story. That's all I'm here to do.
Yeah.
Just to try and it will help sell what you've got.
Yeah.
It seems like so much hard work. And and in the end you always feel like they arrive hating you and they leave hating you.
And when they're not genuine, I'm sure it comes across, and they've
Oh.
just got the lip service, and this is what.
Yeah, look, and I'm. It's a big brush stroke I'm making, I know, because there are some very good exceptions. But by and large, for me, these are colour stories ultimately, and nice, and I think we need them.
Yeah.
But
not your favourite.
no, not for me.
One of the stories you did, and we mentioned it before, but it's going from celebrities to a very personal thing, but the death of your father. Do you want to just tell us about that and why you did a story about that and why you consider it the hardest story that you've done and possibly one of the most important stories?
Yes. Well, my dad, who was my rock, really, a country town man, genuine, trusting, caring, thoughtful bloke, a dairy farmer. Anyway, he got what was pneumonia and ultimately went to hospital via an ambulance and went into the local public hospital, was treated and got through that, although there were some mistakes while he was in there as well, but forgivable because he didn't die.
Yeah.
But then they moved him to the private hospital to recuperate. And then that is where he didn't receive his medication, his anti-stroke medication, for the entire 8 days that he was there because it wasn't written down. And and then Dad had a major stroke. And I just couldn't believe that something so basic could occur. I just felt, wow, he'd recovered, he was doing well, he was under their observation, all that, and you didn't give him his anti-stroke medication. That's pretty basic. As a result of that, I was pretty devastated by this fundamental error. But of course, I was to learn that there were many fundamental errors that were occurring. And before I knew it, Dad was still dying when people were nurses, doctors, other patients were telling me their own terrible stories. Dad hadn't even died when we were getting, I'm so sorry, your dad's here, and because they all knew what had happened.
Okay.
Country town.
Yeah.
So Dad did die, and it was after that I thought, really, why has this occurred? Because there are really good people in those hospitals. There are really good people trying very hard. Nobody wakes up to go and do something terrible.
Yeah,
I get that.
of course.
But I realised that the rural system was broken beyond belief. But then I realised it had been broken for a long time. I'm just at the end of a queue of terribleness. So I decided I should tell the story. And I did think about it, but I thought, I ask other people to do this.
Yep.
So I will tell my dad's story. I think it could have been prevented.
Yeah.
That's why I think Dad didn't have to die that day.
That adds to the pain, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I told this story, and of course, got lots of other people with their terrible stories as well. You know, ultimately, I'm not going to compare terribleness, but I did think, thank God Dad was 88 and had some life, I guess. But it's still, my horror wasn't taken away. So I told the story. The New South Wales Parliament set up an inquiry into rural health and declared what we all knew was appalling. Everything's terrible. You name it, it's all terrible. Well, it's still going on today.
Okay.
It's still going on today. There were 44 recommendations of change, and the government of today was behind all those changes, said that was all happening. But really, the rural health, if it is a truth, if you live in a country town, and particularly out west, I mean, at least on the coast, there are doctors who are happy to go, and because people like the beach or whatever, but you cannot get staff.
Those remote locations.
I then did stories out west, and that's almost a crime scene because of the lack of staff, the way in which a meagre amount of people are expected to do, an enormous job. They're bringing in cleaners and gardeners to sit with patients while they run to answer the phone or to deal with somebody, Gary Jubelin, who's just come in because he's severed his finger or something,
mistakes are going to be made, aren't they?
It just is a cycle of horror, and I don't know how. To me, there seems to be an outrageous amount of money that's already there. Yeah. It's how it's being spent is my very humble view. And I wonder how this can keep going.
Well, it's good that you put the spotlight on it and highlight it. But quite often I see where there's situations that are bad like that. You get the initial response from the politicians and you get the recommendations, but it's about implementing the recommendations in a timely manner.
Well, and that it is such a big issue, and it's Australia wide. There's something like 7 million Australians who live in the country who require, some sort of health. They're not expecting to have a heart transplant up the road.
No.
They're just expecting that somebody might be able to, A, there will be a doctor, B, somebody might be able to give them immediate treatment, and C, get them to, somewhere else to get them the major treatment if it's required. They're not expecting the world. Yeah. They're just expecting something. Yeah. And it's just I'm shocked, constantly shocked. It's still going on. I know that I think the News Corp and the Daily Telegraph have been absolutely on it as well of recent times, and thank God, because I think that is what the media has to do.
That is a role, a worthwhile role of the media to put the spotlight on things like that.
We all pay taxes, and the people in the country pay taxes just like the rest of us. Yeah. And when you've got paramedics having to make a priority about, I don't know which one I can go to.
Well, we do. We all pay those taxes, and health services. It's it should be the measure of society, and it shouldn't discriminate because people are in remote locations. And that, as you said, you're not expecting the heart transplant out west. They come to the city, but the basic stuff.
Just basic stuff, it'd be good.
And people, it becomes problematic because if people are under stress and overwork constantly, they're going to make mistakes, and they'll probably more than likely leave the profession. So they're just.
That's why I'm saying, in my dad's situation, that's a mistake.
Yeah.
That's not a willful action.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't see it. I thought it was a bit of an unforgivable mistake in many respects, but it was a mistake. Nobody intends to cause harm in that profession, but it's just it was a symptom of that which is failing so many of us. And, if you're in the country driving out to have a nice time, out on a farm somewhere or the vineyards or whatever, and you have the misfortune of having something go wrong, well, you might be introduced to the country town hospital that doesn't actually have a doctor.
So that even happens to us city folks.
You venture out beyond the Blue Mountains and I worry.
Yeah. Well, look, it's something that does need to be fix. So the more people talk about it, the more people push. But it's not about, we've had an inquiry and then recommendations unless they get implemented. And I've seen that too many times with parliamentary inquiries.
I can't understand why politics gets so in the way of this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, politics runs our lives, I know, but it's just a hard and fast fact that something needs to be done. So let's do it.
Liz, I just can't have. I'm too ill-informed to have a political conversation, but I can't help but think a lot of politicians are in there just to feather their own nest and how they get re-elected the next time, and that shouldn't be what politics is about. Politics should be doing the right thing. You're representing a community.
Well, look, what I do know is that votes count. And if you're not getting much joy from your local member, change your vote.
Yeah, well, that's a way of
that's what I think, and it's pretty hard for people to change votes. They find it hard
making it count. The Under Investigation show, which I was very fortunate enough, and we worked quite a bit on that show together. I like the concept of the show, and I just want to ask you a question. Maybe I might take some notes here. You got your head around so much information I saw when we were filming and the detail of the information. Is that something that you're just naturally good at? Because we would be covering one particular thing and then pile of paper and you'd get your head around the next part. Where's that skill come from?
Oh, just research, just having to, I am that person who needs to know it all. Unfortunately, I'm grateful for the research that's done, but I need to be able to see the paper that you got that from, or I need to be able to read, and I need to know the answers to a whole lot of stuff as best I can. I go through all those police documents and try and make sense of every bit of information when we get down to doing those episodes in particular, because a lot of them were, from the past. Yeah. And there was quite a lot of information out there. And we were trying to, as you know, bring it forward, new information. I don't feel good if I don't think I've covered it well. Yeah. That before I came here, I reread my book. Now, that sounds ridiculous, but it was like, oh gosh, I've got to remember, what did I say? But, that's just me. I couldn't come here without being ready. Yeah, as best I could.
As best you could. Well, you've done pretty good. I think it's gone pretty.
It's a bit ridiculous. I did write it, but it's.
I know what you're saying. I've been interviewed about a book, and you write it, and I think you get to the point where you've written a book, and you're so tired of the effort that goes into writing a book, you just sort of push that aside. And
also, I'm writing another book, not about me, but I'm writing another book, and my head's in that book. Okay. So I do. There's a whole lot of information I'm shifting, but anyway, yes, I must know.
But that is, and like we talk, and you've made some jokes about your career, and you've been fortunate. But my observation of it, Liz, and I picked up on a bit of it working with you, but also just the way that you carry yourself. You get on with people. And that in a ruthless industry, it's not bad to just get on with people, because they mightn't agree with what you did or whatever, but they can't say a bad, well, I'm sure there's some people that say a bad word.
No, I think fundamentally, I like people, you like people, I like people. I think most people are good people. You may not agree with everything they do or say, but ultimately I like people. And I come with goodwill. I'm happy to have my mind changed too, by the way. Yeah. I might feel like I'm not sure about you and then come away going, I do feel good about you. I'm happy to give people the benefit of the doubt. I think that's not a bad place to be. Yeah.
Well, we might wrap it up here, Liz, but
What, I've got to go.
How do I?
Time's up.
This is awkward. Okay, this is live. Yes, Liz. The time we've run out. Okay. I'm Gary Jubelin. I'm Liz Hayes, and this is I Catch Killers. Can we finish with that?
Sure.
I'll do it first. I'm Gary Jubelin.
And I'm Liz Hayes. This is I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun, Liz. All the best for you, whatever you're doing. I know you're busy. You're doing lots of stuff, but you're a pleasure to work with, and it's great having you on here. Thanks for coming in.
No, thank you. It was my pleasure, actually. Thank you.